Good evening and welcome to another episode of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live from the beautiful Cape May County, New Jersey. I don't say where I'm actually from because nobody knows. Nobody's ever heard of it anyway. Via SHR Media. I'm so happy to be broadcasting live again with you after being on a 2-week hiatus. Not for fun, for business, just things I had to take care of, and it happened to fall during showtime. So I hope you guys enjoyed the rebroadcast. My dog Denzel wants to make sure that you enjoyed the rebroadcast as well. He's been quiet as a little church mouse all day.
You got a fan.
This is how he always does it. He was quiet as a church mouse all day long, had nothing to say. And as soon as I go on the air, why the dog has to be in the studio with me because he's a little 6-pound Chihuahua and usually quite darling, except for when I open the show. It's just about every week when I open the show. So
Melanie, that's how dogs clap.
Oh, okay. He's just applauding me. And who you guys are listening to is the guest for my first hour, Mr. Toby Mathis, Esquire. He's a founding partner of Anderson Law Group, and he's going to talk to us today about how to use your business to slash your taxes. So we're going to listen very keenly as he talks to us about that as soon as we are done to open and go to break and all that good stuff. But I'm so happy to be back and to have my listeners back. And I cannot see everybody in the Facey chat right now, but I know Doug is here. I know, let's see, who else can I see is here? Oh, I see the author is here. I see a whole bunch of people are piling into the Facey chat. Hello. So anyhow, I've been gone for 2 weeks. I apologize for that. I wanted to share something with you guys, though. If you didn't see my little video that I did earlier today, I had the craziest, weirdest experience at a business meeting I was at. I generally, when I go to business meetings, don't talk shop, don't talk politics and things like that because it's just such a contentious matter these days. And I was taking notes on my iPad, as I want to do during meetings because I'm very nerdy that way and I always take notes. And apparently I was dimed out via somebody looking at my computer while I was working as somebody who voted for Donald Trump. And the guy walked up to me after the meeting and was basically like, "How dare you? Mike Vestner, thank you so much for joining us." And said, "What's wrong with you?" Basically. And I don't even know this person. And I get it. I totally understand people being upset. But first of all, I didn't invite him into that conversation. Secondly, why were you looking at my laptop that closely while I was taking notes? Third, why did you feel as though it was okay to come up to me and talk to me about it and then insult my vote? Just really weird. It's just a weird thing. I just think some people have this ivory tower or sense of morality about themselves, this moral high ground where they think that they can just come up to you and say anything that they want. I find it to be bizarre, and it seems to be a major violation of business etiquette. If you ask me, no one asked, but it's my show, so I'm going to tell you. My guest for the second hour, by the way, is Dr. Donald Chambers, Emeritus Professor of Finance at Lafayette College. He's going to talk to us about his book, Freedom First, Brief Readings in Liberty, Peace, and Prosperity. We're all about the prosperity. Oh, excuse me. So I'm glad to have him on the show for the second hour. In Money Talk News, I feel like I'm talking really fast. I could probably slow down just a little bit. In Money Talk News, Boeing is anticipating $5.6 million charge to earnings this quarter, and it's tied to the grounding of the 737 MAX jet fleet that they grounded because they've had 2 fatal crashes. They also said that they're likely to rack up another $1.7 million in MAX production costs due to a factory slowdown. This is according to the New York Times. You would think that Boeing would be having all kinds of really big trouble, but in the scheme of things, I don't think that's really a bad thing. Doug in the Facey chat says, heard verbally violent political debates in the 60s. Yeah, I'll bet. So that's how Boeing's dealing with the crises that they have going on right now. Now, here's something that I found interesting. According to Bloomberg, they say that, or let me make sure I have that source correct. Okay. According to Ars Technica, kids these days would rather be a YouTuber or a vlogger than an astronaut. This is 3 in 10 American and British children said they would rather be YouTubers or vloggers. We need to start talking to our kids, people, if that's the case. Seriously. Rather than an astronaut. And as a matter of fact, being an astronaut fell to the bottom of the list of vocations or things that kids aspire to be. It was last on the list. This was at 11%. Now in China, 56% of the kids in that same block said that they wanted to be astronauts. So I hate to side with China on anything for obvious reasons, but I mean, we're doing it wrong, ladies and gentlemen. If our kids think that being YouTubers and vloggers is the way to go, and I'll tell you, as somebody who has the pleasure of teaching financial literacy to teenagers and teaching college kids as well, a lot of them tell me that they're not going to need the stuff that I'm teaching them because they're going to be a YouTuber. They're going to stream online. They're going to do this, that, and the other, and that they don't need to take my class. And it's a little bit scary because you have about as much chance of being successful in that as you have to be in the NBA. And it's something like, 2% of college athletes actually make it into the NBA. So it's just your chances of being super successful and making a living at that are super, super slim. And I'm thinking we're doing something wrong as parents, and quite frankly, as somebody who's in the classroom and as educators, if that's what kids think that the ideal situation is for a vocation. And finally, in the Money Talk news, and this is not going to be news to anyone who is an introvert, which I obviously am, just kidding. According to the New York Times, being an introvert is not easy in today's workplace. It equates to leadership and ambition with extroversion and being present. That sounds like a really academic definition. But according to the New York Times, being an introvert is very tough in the workplace. Now, I don't consider myself an introvert, but the article in the New York Times says that people who are introverts, I apologize. I have no idea why my dog is barking, but he's going to be banned from the studio. Oh my gosh, I'm on the air. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I don't usually do that, but he was making such a ruckus, I had to go get him from what he was doing. Okay. So I apologize for that. But I don't consider myself to be an introvert. And I prefer to work solo than being in a group. I hate team projects. I hate group projects. I know that sounds really awful. That's probably why this show is not called Money Talk with Melanie and so. Money Talk with Melanie and Denzel, which was the show a minute ago, because he was barking so much. For those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, this is the source of all of that total racket. This little 6-pound ball of fluff was having an absolute fit. And I apologize for that. So you're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. My guest for the first hour is Toby Mathis, Esquire. And my guest for the second hour is Dr. Donald Chambers. We will be back in one moment.
For everything in existence, there is always one or more reasons for its existence. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, the United States of America was founded by people who grew weary of being bullied by the red-coated soldiers of King George's British Army. After securing liberty from Great Britain, the founders did not forget what they believed to be the source of their victory, and thus stated and wrote about that source in both public gatherings and thousands of written documents, including personal letters. President George Washington warned America to never stray from her faith main reason, not only for our existence, but also for what he foresaw as our future greatness. For many years, the United States was, at the very least, a Christian professing republic. Americans fought against bad indoctrinations and sought to maintain a good moral standard in the battle to rescue America from the doomsday mission of fervent leftists. It is imperative that we, the people, heed the wisdom of such luminaries as Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, not to abandon the true source of American exceptionalism and greatness. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me on AmericanMatters.com Fridays at 1 p.m. Pacific and 4 p.m. Eastern.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
Right now, you can get the credit you deserve. Just visit MrCreditRepair.biz. Let their expert credit repair specialist remove late payments, charge-offs, collections, even old bankruptcies fast and easy. That's MrCreditRepair.biz. Why go anyplace else? Increase your credit score today. At Mr. Credit, you always get a quality service, all at our everyday discounted price. Stop getting turned down for cars, credit cards, or even new homes. Visit MrCreditRepair.biz today. That's MrCreditRepair.biz. Your credit repair is our number one priority.
Making a living can be tough these days with so many jobs going overseas. If you love numbers and puzzles and want job security, you can become a tax specialist with an amazing 6-month tax course from Tax Mama. Operate your own tax practice locally or anywhere in the world where there are American taxpayers. It's a great way to write off your trips to visit family for months at a time. Everything you need to pass the IRS 3 special enrollment examinations is included in this course. Visit irsexams.school. And if you need more than 6 months, that's okay. Take your time. You're in the course until you pass the exams or until you unsubscribe and reject Tax Mama's emails.
And we're back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Klett, and today's show is Money Talk with Melanie, and my good friend, my sidekick, Denzel here, who is making all of that racket. It turns out, ladies and gentlemen, I live right next door to my mom, and my studio is in my home, and my mom forgot that I was on the air, and she was talking to my dog. So they were having a full-fledged conversation. It was hilarious. I'm sorry. I thought that was very funny. I said, "Why is he making so much noise?" But that was why my mom was chatting with him. They were having a nice little conversation because they forgot that this was airtime. So I apologize. Without further ado, I want to bring on my first guest, Toby Mathis. He's an attorney on a mission to help investors and business owners keep more and grow more. He's a founding partner of Anderson Law Group. He helped Anderson grow its practice from one business in real estate planning to a thriving tax practice and registered agent service with tens of thousands of clients nationwide. In addition to advising clients and investing in his own real estate projects throughout the United States, he is a member of Forbes Real Estate and Finance Council and the author of several books, including first, second, and third editions of Tax-Wise Business Ownership and the 12 Steps to Running a Successful Business. Toby teaches extensively throughout the U.S. to groups of investors and professionals, with many of his courses certified for continuing education credit for legal, accounting, and real estate professionals. He teaches a popular biweekly webinar entitled Tax Tuesday, where business owners and investors can ask any tax question they have, and they answer them on the air. It is just Toby and a CPA who answer and turn the recordings into podcasts. And without further ado, the one and only Toby Mathis, Esquire. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there. I apologize for.
You handled it like a champ. You were amazing.
Well, I'll tell you what. I used to do Sirius XM. I did Sirius XM while Steve Bannon was making a decision on what they were going to do with the station. So I was a guest host, and I had this incident. It's a funny story where I talked to a lot of truckers on Sirius, and we were talking about a trucking law, Okay. And the producer, and you being a former radio host, you'll really enjoy this. So the producer says in my ear, did you say another word that rhymes with trucking, which I had not said, but he thought I did. He just whispered it. I was talking. And he says in my ear, did you say that word? And of course, my eyes got really big because you think, did I say that word? I'm pretty sure I did not. But that kind of stuff goes on in your ear while you are talking, and you have other distractions when you're on the air, especially live. So it happens. I apologize. But I thought that was the funniest story ever, because suddenly you can see the producers' faces change all of a sudden, and very softly in my ear, one of them said, "Did you say the F word?" But he said the word. I was like, no. I was like, that's trucking. That's trucking. I said.
So Gazelle, if the dog was with the truckers, then he'd be a trucking dog.
It would be. Yeah, right now he is a trucking dog. For sure. So listen, is there anything that I left out of your background that in my intro that you'd like to add?
You did perfect. I always just say I'm like an anti-lawyer. A lot of folks are used to lawyers and they're very highfalutin. And I became a lawyer because I didn't like lawyers for the most part. And I had a very good mentor, and he said to his son and I, who was also a very good friend of mine I grew up with, and he was like, "Hey, we all need to go to law school." So his son went to law school. I went to law school. Even my mentor, who's since passed, he went to law school. He got kicked out very quickly.
Oh no!
In 6 months. He was very conservative and very vocal about it. And we went to school in Seattle, and happens to be kind of very liberal. And so he was just very vocal about it. So he got invited to leave very quickly.
I can totally relate to that. I had an incident when I was getting my master's during orientation, and one of the professors tried to cite something like the New York Times as a reliable source for research. And well, exactly. Right. So, and all the rest of the teeny boppers in there, I'm sure, thought that was perfectly reasonable. But I was one of the older people getting my master's, and I said, excuse me, do you mean for editorials or do you mean for actual facts? Yeah, they weren't.
I'm not a big fan of citing to authority in any stretch, but when you cite to a opinionated source, then you're he's kind of garbage in, garbage out.
I mean, why don't we just add Wikipedia while we're at it? I mean, come on.
You mean people's opinions aren't always factually accurate?
No, they are not factually accurate. So I saw you are very well informed about a number of topics as far as real estate and taxes and business growth. And I thought I'd really like to talk about how you can use your business to maximize slashing your taxes. I thought that was an interesting topic. And so that's where I'd love to focus today, because one of the big complaints, even though we have an economy that's doing well, one of the complaints that I hear often from people that it's only the rich who are doing well. And you hear a lot about how, especially from places like the New York Times, that the rich don't pay any taxes, which is just false. But they do have ways of getting around them using their businesses. And there's reasons for that we'll get into. So I guess the first place that I want to start is, where do you think that's a misnomer? Is that a misnomer in your opinion, that businesses don't pay taxes, or is it somewhere in the middle? How is it that people with businesses actually save on their taxes? Why does it look that way to people?
Well, the easiest way to explain it is kind of through an analogy that we can all relate to. So if you've ever gone to Disney World, Disney World's the easiest. If you've ever flown into Orlando Airport and got that rental car and driven to the Magic Kingdom, there's lots of signs that'll get you there, and they all put you right on the toll roads. You end up stopping about 5 or 6 times on your way there, and the signs are accurate. They're taking you to Disney World, but you're also having to stop and pay along the way. And there's actually a parallel road called Fan Lake Road from the airport. It's actually the first exit when you get off, and you can drive a road know somebody that actually knew that, hey, there's a better path that I don't have to pay as much on. And then you can make the decision. So in the tax world, we have those two roads. And the people that complain are on the toll road, and rightly so. They don't want to get hit with all these tolls. But on the, so then it's just opening your eyes and realizing that there's a better path.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's a fantastic analogy. And so there are so many people that have tons of there's tons of small businesses out there, and there's so many people that have small businesses. And my guess is one of the reasons why businesses fail is because they don't know how to do things like pay less taxes or follow that road that makes the tax burden on businesses a little easier. Because the fact of the matter is there are some pretty high tax burdens on businesses if you don't know any better. Can you give some examples of that?
Yeah, so let's just say we have three businesses. They're the exact same business, but they're structured in three different ways. So, for example, person A may just be a sole proprietor. They listened to an accountant and said, hey, it's easy and cheaper just to be a sole proprietor. And so they operate in as a sole proprietor under way number one. And that could be, by the way, an entity called a limited liability company, still taxed as a sole proprietor. Entity number two is, we'll call it an S corporation. You heard about it a lot during some of the presidential cycles because there was a misnomer that they pay no taxes, because S corporations technically don't pay the tax. They pass it down to their shareholders. So you can say that corporation pays no tax. Okay, the shareholders do. Come on. Quit being nutty. And then so that's number two. So that's person number two, we'll just call it. Then person number three is a C Corp, and it pays the tax at the corporate level. They all pay tax. Person number one, there's no corporate return. Person number two, there's a corporate return, but the individual pays the tax. And person number three, the corporation pays tax, but they all pay at different levels. And so if each of those companies made $100,000, person number one is going to be taxed both as an individual at the federal level, at the state level, and they'll also pay a Social Security tax on that called self-employment tax. It's divided into old age, death, and survivors and Medicare, and it's 15.3% of every dollar, plus they pay the federal tax. Person number two passes all the money down, it's all profit, and it avoids the self-employment tax entirely. Now, it's not quite that simple. Because of that, you have to pay yourself a little bit of a salary, but you only pay Social Security tax on that little bit of salary. And so on $100,000, the math difference is about $14,000 a year on $100,000. Then you go to corporation, person number three, and that entity only pays corporate tax at 21%. It's a flat tax now under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And so same amount of income, same exact business, three entirely different outcomes. And the problem that we have in our wonderful world and with all these, really smart accountants is they all know way number one, and they're scared to death of way number three, or we'll call it the third way, or way number two, which is the SCorp. They may know that one, but that's the only thing they know, is they try to put everybody in that category. And in all reality, you need to look at all three and do a calculation for yourselves to determine which is in your best interest, because everybody's facts and circumstances are different.
Now, you named three different. What are some basic differences between those corporations? A lot of people just go into business, put the business in their name, which means they're not taking advantage of anything that you can take advantage of as a business. What are the basic differences between an S Corp, a sole proprietorship, and an LLC? Basic.
So if I was going to say from a tax standpoint only, I would say the sole proprietor, you absolutely are paying every toll along the way. You cannot have an accountable plan that you as the sole proprietor benefit from, which means it can't reimburse you stuff. As a S Corp, you can start reimbursing quite a bit more, and you eliminate some of that self-employment tax. But if you're a greater than 2% shareholder, some of those benefits are limited. For example, health coverage. If it's reimbursing you all your health expenses, if you're greater than 2%, that's considered income to you and included in your wages. But then the tax code gives you a little loophole. It lets you write off your insurance premiums only. And then a SCorp gets to write everything off under the sun. It can reimburse you anything that you possibly incur for its benefit, and it can write off 100% of your medical, dental, and vision. So we look at all of those things, and everybody's situation is going to be a little different. And you say, geez, gosh, it's not as straightforward as I was hoping. You actually have to do a calculation. You actually do. A little bit of elbow grease. Sand Lake Road, you may have to stop at a couple signs, stop signs or stoplights, and it's not as easy as just driving down the toll road, but it's not nearly as expensive. And you just have to do a weighing test. Is it worth it for me to save $10,000 a year, even if I have to do another tax return? Yeah, maybe it is, but it's up to you. If it's only going to give me a benefit of $1,000, it's probably not. I'll probably just say, hey, I'll be the sole proprietor. The other fun one is you look at lawsuits. And so when I look at things, I'm looking really at three different areas. I'm looking at it from asset protection, making sure that we don't risk our personal assets because I'm trying something in business.
Right.
I look at the tax, and I look at estate planning. How do I pass it on? So I don't want it to die with me. So if you want me to, I can get into the asset protection. I could just leave it to tax.
No, I think asset protection is a good idea. And, part of the reason is because a lot of people don't consider that when they go into business, that asset protection, that, there's some liability there. There's some exposure, if you will, when you go into business, particularly as a sole proprietorship. Before we get into the other part, let's talk about the exposure, or they're probably connected.
Yeah, well, so there's two examples I might give you. Let's say that you just decide you're going to start selling essential oil from home, and you think, okay, there's no exposure for me. Well, let's say somebody takes that and has an adverse reaction and causes them a horrible rash, and they experience pain, and they decide to name you in a lawsuit. It doesn't matter whether you're making $1,000 a year in that endeavor. The exposure is limited, or is virtually unlimited. They can take everything you own, subject to maybe some bankruptcy rules. You might be able to keep a few things, but the adage I give is, let's say you have two spouses, one's a doctor and one is doing an MLM or some side business that incurs a big liability. Let's say maybe you employed somebody and they sued you the lights out for discrimination against you. You live in California and somehow they can allege anything. You are not just putting your assets at risk, you're putting your entire marital assets at risk. You're putting all that income that's being generated from the doctor, plus any of your savings and anything else, you're putting it clearly at risk. And so to put a box around that, you really need to put some sort of entity in place. And in all three categories that I was going over for tax, you could put a single LLC under any of those and have it taxed either as a sole proprietor, an SCorp, or a SCorp. So we're just putting a box around it from an asset protection standpoint so that if you do have something go wrong, they're limited to just the business. When you operate as a sole proprietor, which means you operate in your own name with no business entity, you are the business. So if the business does anything, you're personally on the hook for it, including your marital assets.
Wow. And that's true. And that's when they say sole proprietor, that's basically what it means is you're solely responsible for what goes on in that business.
Yeah.
That, you know what I mean? So, and that's a huge risk. Now, a lot of times, like you were saying, it depends on, how much, whether or not it's worth it. But a lot of people recommend an LLC just for that reason alone. If you have lots of assets to protect, then you may want to, form your company as an LLC rather than a sole proprietorship because there's so much exposure there.
You don't realize the types of exposure too. It could be that you wrote something and you did a copyright infringement. Somebody sues you for $10 million. And you say, wait a second, I didn't do that much damage. Well, you're still going to go through the lawsuit. And there's something called dead right, which means you're right. You didn't really infringe, but you're still dead because it cost you $300,000 to defend yourself.
To defend the lawsuit, exactly. And that's a...
So you want to be able to cut it. You want to be able to say, hey, there's no assets in here. Worst case scenario, I dissolve it or bankrupt it, and it goes away, and I continue to survive and fight another day.
Exactly. Now, I want to talk. We have 5 minutes left before the last break. I want to talk briefly. Well, not briefly, but I want to talk about loopholes that people miss What are some, you have a business and there's loopholes that people miss where they could be possibly saving money on their taxes and they're not doing it?
Yeah, so the big one for me is something called an accountable plan. And an accountable plan is available to you if you're an employee of a company. And you cannot be your own employee of a sole proprietor. It has to be an SCorp or a SCorp. So from a tax standpoint, you need to be taxed as an SRC. Now, you could be an LLC taxed as an SCorp. You could just be a traditional SCorp. You could be a SCorp. You could be an LLC taxed as a SCorp. It doesn't matter as long as you can be an employee of it. That employer now can reimburse you for anything that you have that benefits the employer. So, for example, if it needs you to have a cell phone. So, for example, Melanie, you have you probably need to be available on your cell phone, given that you're in communications and you're doing a lot of business and you're talking to people all the time. So, as an individual, I can't write that off. There's no such thing as miscellaneous itemized deductions anymore on your Schedule A, on a personal tax return. It was done away with under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So the only way I'm going to get that back is if an employer reimburses it for me. And let's say that I'm spending $100 a month on data and cell phone. Well, that company can literally write you a check that you don't have to report as wages. You don't have to report anywhere. You get to just take the money and the company writes it off, which means it deducts it against its income. So if the company makes $100,000, we're reducing its income by every dollar it can get you. And there's a ton of things that fall into those categories. It's not just cell phones, but it's equipment. It's even use of your home and administrative office in your house. It's mileage on your vehicle. All of these things. It could be your internet. It could be even a portion of your property taxes. All that stuff can come into play when you are operating as a small business. Even if you have a separate office, even if you have a different principal place of business. And in my experience with our clients, it's usually to the tune of $20,000 to $30,000 a year, kind of as a starting point. And we see it go upwards of six figures, depending on the type of business and how much it's making. But it's not a small amount. It's a very large amount. And that's the one that 90% of the accountants completely miss.
Wait a minute. I'm thinking that people who do their taxes themselves are missing it. You're saying that accountants and CPAs are missing this?
Absolutely. In fact, there was an awesome study done by the Treasury Inspector General, where they go in and they take a look and say, hey, how accurate are the preparers out there? So they did a study of chain preparers, the H&R Blocks of the world, all those types. I'm not singling them out, and this is a government, just in case they're listening and they get all mad. This was a government study where they ghosted these guys, and they gave them a set of facts that the agents would go in and give to the preparer to see how accurate they were. And on individual returns, they were fairly accurate, but when you threw a business onto that return, Schedule C, their accuracy rate dropped to zero. And I'm not snowing you on this. It was literally they did not get a single one correct.
Wow.
So it's scary. So
and they're expensive.
They went to small accountants, your little CPA or your accountant on the that has the little office, and the accuracy rate went up to 4%. 4%, not 40. 4. Which means they realized that the vast majority of business returns were being done incorrectly. Now you're going to say, well, maybe it was in the benefit of the taxpayer. No, they estimated $1 billion a year as what the overpayments were. It is, in other words, the government lets it exist. Although I will give credit to the IRS, they tried to impose some rules on preparers saying they needed to be licensed and they needed to pass a 2-day test. So either you're a CPA, an EA, or a lawyer, or you have to pass this 2-day test. And they were defeated in court because they found that the courts found that they did not have the authority to do that since they're a policing agency, and they're not allowed to create the law. So they're saying, hey, we tried, but the vast majority of preparers out there are not qualified to do.
I have to figure out. I have to wonder. Like what lobbyists, who would fight against that? To whose benefit is it to fight against something like that? That's the first thing that pops into my head.
About 80% of the tax preparers out there are non-licensed. What you had is a lot of the chain preparers blocking it because that's who works for them. They're not CPAs. I mean, there are CPAs that work at H&R Block. Don't
Right.
And they're great people. All the employees of these chain preparers are probably great people. The problem that you have is that a lot of them are not qualified to do the work. And maybe they're doing it on their spare time. Like I'm not going to kid you. It wasn't H&R Block. It was another chain preparer. I won't name them. But there was a McDonald's by our office, one of our offices in Vegas. We have 3 there. And one of the people that was the cashiers, the workers, said, I have a second job. I work over at this chain preparer.
At the McDonald's?
And I do tax. And they literally go over, and after they got done flipping burgers, they go over and prepare tax returns.
That's unfortunate. That's just unfortunate. We're up against a commercial. I'm gonna try to hold myself together during this commercial break. Wow. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. My guest this hour is Toby Mathis, Esquire. He's talking to us about how to use your business to slash your taxes. And we just finished telling us about how underqualified some tax preparers could possibly be at some of these chain tax preparation companies, which was a little bit frightening. I'm sorry. But you're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be back in one moment.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to SHR Media Network.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics,
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
and all kinds of other things.
Money, recipes, and events? All kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on SHRmedia.com.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz. Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
New show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday. Live and direct from the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's no to it, just ever. Because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. And my guest this hour is Toby Mathis, Esquire. He's talking to us about how to use your business to slash your taxes. Before the break, we were talking about some of the things that tax preparers miss. And it's not just people who are not necessarily well educated in the tax law and well versed in the details of the tax law, but it's some CPAs and things too, is what you were telling me before the break.
Oh, yeah. It's not, again, there tends to be a pretty wide gap. Either you know it or you don't, and it's kind of a niche. So I liken things to the medical profession quite often. You say, you may have a general practitioner that gets most things, but if you need brain surgery, you should go to a brain surgeon. There's niches in the taxes as well, where you don't want to go, the foot doctor. You don't want to go if you have a headache, right? So you want to make sure you're seeing the right professional. And unfortunately, there's no sign out front that says, by the way, I'm well versed on investments or small business. They just say tax preparer. And everybody assumes that they can do everything and they understand how these things go together. And that's just not the case. And
it's very true that I don't think people realize how complex the tax laws can be. Speaking of which, especially when you have so many, the tax law changes from year to year to year. It sometimes in minute ways, sometimes in major ways. Now, we just had some major changes in the tax law. They call it, some people refer to it as the Trump tax cut. But that brought about some major changes in the tax laws. Are there a few that are specific to businesses that people really want to know about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the Tax Cut and Jobs Act was absolutely fantastic if you have a business. Not so great if you're just an individual. It's still good. Overall, I think that people are probably paying a little bit less, but for SCorps, for example, you took the highest rate from 39% down to 21%.
Which is huge.
And for, what's that?
I said, which is huge. I'm sorry, which was huge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's almost half, cut in half. For individuals, they gave us a little bit, but they also took a lot away. They took away miscellaneous itemized deductions completely. They upped the standard deduction, and they paired that with a reduction in the amount you could write off for state and local taxes called the SALT deduction.
Right.
So, for example, if you're there on the East Coast, and I grew up in Philly, so I can relate. If you're on the East Coast, you probably had a little bit of a tax increase because you can't write off your state and local tax.
And if you live in New Jersey, you got killed. Trust me.
Yeah, I have some clients that had some very choice words where you literally had a $50,000 deduction get reduced to $10,000, which is the max, and then they were better off just taking the standard deduction. They got no benefit for their giving that year, which we did see a decrease in charitable giving amongst individuals because you lost a lot of the tax benefit. For teachers who relied on being able to write off the materials that they provided to their schools as miscellaneous itemized deductions, they lost that ability. Or if they got to write off, it was below the standard deduction amount. So you saw some people definitely get hit. On a business side, they gave a huge cut to SCorps, but they also gave everybody else a nice benefit. It's called a 199A deduction. Also, what you guys would know it as is a 20% reduction in the tax, the income that you're having to recognize. So if you made $100,000 as a small business and it flowed onto your return, you only had other than being a business. So that seems to me like a nice little pat on the head. I like it.
Yeah, that's good. Now, let me ask you this, and this is one of the things that kind of irritates me about people's lack of understanding of tax laws. Now, sometimes you do take a direct, like you mentioned, especially with the salt, what they did with the salt taxes and all that kind of thing. Some of us got hurt, particularly the first year when you didn't really have time to prepare for it because it started kind of in the middle of the year. Right, because usually a lot of times, people are proactive and they operate their businesses and operate their personal finances in such a way as to avoid taxes. And you really didn't get an opportunity to do that when they passed that law. But when businesses get tax cuts, there are people who believe that they get no residual benefits from that when businesses, like, for example, for the corp, you mentioned the corporate tax is getting cut, I believe, from 36% to 21%. Even though you may not see it in your personal tax return, do people in general benefit when corporations get tax cuts?
Absolutely. You look at it, and this is what's so interesting. So I'm an employer. We have 250 people, plus or minus 10%, that work for us at any given time in our firm. So I can just tell you, it's really tough to find people right now. And what does that do? It causes the salaries of those that you keep, and you're keeping away from other companies, to go up. You also see more profitability, which allows more investment into your business. And that's what companies do, is when they have dollars, they say, should we recognize this as income, or should we invest it in research and development or other assets? A lot of them will do the latter, and they'll start investing it into the business. And it may be deductible, so it reduces the income, but there's an investment into the business. They're not spending it needlessly on a tax that really, depending on what your philosophy is just kind of going into a black hole. If you spend more, and the numbers, by the way, back up what I'm saying, if you put more into your company, it's going to grow faster. If it grows faster, you're able to pay more in salaries and give more benefits. I don't see why it took them so long to get here. It absolutely has the desired effect of allowing the economy to continue to grow.
Exactly. And the other thing is, when the stock market goes up, people's 401ks grow now, and that's a pretty direct effect that a good economy and cutting the corporate tax had on people's bank accounts. But I really think that people don't look at things like their 401ks and even the health of their pension funds because they're invested in the market. I don't think they look at that as like real money.
I think you're right. I think they look at it and they say, I haven't earned it yet because I haven't sold it yet, and I'm not reaping the benefit of it personally. Like, if I have dollars in my pocket that I can go spend, that's far different than numbers that on a statement that's going to be for 20 years from now or something like that.
Exactly. I had someone on my Facebook page the other day complaining about how have I benefited from the economy? I haven't benefited from the economy. Now I was laughing at him because I happen to have taught his son. And I said, well, doesn't your son, I said, you know how black unemployment is super low? I said, doesn't your son have a job and he's working all the time because we're having such trouble getting employment in this area? And I said, so if your son is working and he's asking you for less money, and he's probably making more money than he normally would because the job market is so tight, your salary just went up because your dollar is going a much further way. And I said, and that's the way the economy works, my friend. And he was like, he thought that was some foolishness.
They don't want to hear it. Like, competition drives salaries up. Just because we live it every day. When you have good folks, you fight to keep them.
Exactly.
You want, everything from employee benefits, those go up. It's the market. And the stronger the market, the more competitive the market is, the more you're worth. And so you want people bidding on you. My brother works for Amazon, for example, and we talk a little bit about antitrust and whether they're going to break the company up just because, I don't know, I think it's kind of fun. And he's like, hey, I'd benefit if it got broken up because then I'd have two divisions to have a bidding war on me. It's like,
oh my God. And that is so true. And that's what I was trying to explain to him. I said, if your son is working and he's not asking you for money, your dollar just went a lot further. And that's because because teenagers have record low unemployment, blacks have record low unemployment, and your son is both. So you have benefited from the Trump tax cut. So he wasn't buying it. I thought it was pretty good reasoning on my part.
I like it. Hey, let me give your listeners a little freebie for them, just to put some money in their pocket, because you're mentioning kids and having to pay for them. And I see this all the time when parents are very motivated to get their kids a degree or whatnot, and we can table the idea of whether student loans are a sham or not, and whether the amazing amount of debt that's been incurred by our children is going to stifle their ability for home ownership and things like that. We just look at it and say, hey, let's say that mom and dad are paying for school. It's coming out of your highest tax bracket. And if all you did was to have a family business, and it could be just about anything, and no, it doesn't have to make money. There's statutes that apply to only specific entities, and there's exceptions to every rule. But let's just say that you were able to pay them a salary, let them pay for their tuition at their tax bracket, i.e. zero. Wouldn't you be better off doing that than than paying for their tuition out of your tax bracket? And you see people, the light bulb goes off, and all of a sudden they go, wait a second, I can do that? And you're like, yes, you can employ your kids.
Yeah, I know somebody who, yep.
Go ahead.
I know somebody who does that, who has his own business, and that's exactly what he did.
And you're literally taking something that would have been taxable. So if I paid $10,000, my daughter graduated last year from college. And if I had to pay for her tuition, I would have to earn about twice as much as what the tuition is.
Exactly.
If she makes that money, she almost pays no tax on it.
Exactly.
So it's clearly the benefit is to, hey, pay your kids and let them pay for it. A lot of folks don't realize that's available to businesses. It's not available to people that are not.
That is excellent. Well, listen, we're at the close of the show. Please let the audience know how they can get in touch with you, how they can avail themselves of your services, how they can buy any of your books. This is a minute or two to promote yourself heavily.
You know what? I'm going to make it really easy, Melanie, and that is I'm just going to say I'll answer any of your tax questions absolutely for free. We do it on Tax Tuesday. Every other Tuesday, you can bring your accountant on. You can sit on. I don't care who's on there. We have thousands of people that join in. We answer about 200 questions a session. It's absolutely free. Just go to AndersonAdvisors.com. Just Anderson with an O, Advisors. Or you can look me up on the internet, Toby Mathis. Probably the first hit's going to be Tax Tuesday because we have so many people that participate. And it's absolutely free. And you can ask any question you want. Absolutely no cost. The reason we do it is I just believe, me personally, my philosophy is that you better give back. And if you've been blessed in life, you owe it to society to give back. And so that's the way I do it. I look and say, hey, rather than having to go see somebody who's going to try to get you in as a client and everything else, I'll just answer your question. You can join on. And they're fast and fun and, just a kick in the pants if you like a little bit of tax knowledge.
I love it. I love it. And I that was misleading what I said. I said close the show. I should have said close of the hour. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I do hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. And I'll reciprocate. Love what you're doing. Believe in what you're doing. And hopefully you're blessed as a result.
Oh, I certainly am. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Yep. You are listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. That was Toby Mathis. Gave us some really good information on how we can use our business to slash our taxes. I know I'm going to be using some of his fabulous tips that he gave us. That is the close of the first hour, and I will be right back in a few minutes with the guest for the second hour, who is Dr. Donald Chambers, and he is going to talk to us about his book. He's a professor of finance at Lafayette College. He's going to talk to us about his book, Freedom First, Brief Readings on Liberty, Peace, and Prosperity. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be back in a few moments.
Right now, you can get the credit you deserve. Just visit MrCreditRepair.biz.